Okay, so we're now looking at how we can solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formulas. Now, using the quadratic formula is going to be the last methods we introducing into solving quadratic equations. And quadratic formulas, one formula, it takes care of all equations. It takes care of all quadratic equations. So let's see how we can use quadratic formula. Now, in class, I already discussed and introduced the quadratic formula. Now, so let's look at example number 1 here. We want to solve the quadratic equation x squared plus 8x plus 15 equals 0. So before we get started into any of these examples, I have to mention once again, in order to solve the quadratic equation using quadratic formula, you always need to bring your quadratic equation into the general form, which is we have an ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So this is what we so-call the general form of the quadratic equation. Otherwise, if your equation appears not to be in a general form, you need to bring that into the general form equation where you have all the 3 terms all well laid out. The x squared term, the x term, and the non-x term. And then equals 0 on the other hand side. So now, once again, back to this equation. We already have our equation here in general form, so we are ready to get it solved. So now, before you can just use the quadratic formula, all you have to do is, in your general form of the quadratic equation, just simply recognize the coefficient in front of the x squared, in this case, is a 1. The coefficient in front of the x term, in this case, it's b, and it equals positive 8, including sign. And then also, the last thing is to recognize the coefficient c, the non-x coefficient. In this case, it equals positive 15. Okay, so that's all we have to do before the formula. So now it's all just plugging in the formula. Now, to solve for x, the value for x in this equation, excuse me, the value for x in this equation would be found by the formula minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So that's the general sketch of the formula. And that formula is going to give you the guideline here. B is going to take whatever the value for the coefficient b. So it's going to be, according to the formula, we're going to have minus 8 plus and minus. And keep in mind the plus and minus here represents that we're going to have 2 separate operations here. One operation here is a plus and the other operation is a minus. So we're going to end up with 2 expected answers. Square root and then b squared, which is an 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 15. Okay, and all that underneath the square root, and all here will be divided by 2 times 1. And once again, I should have put parentheses around the 8, shouldn't I? Okay, so that's how at this point here, I just plug in the numbers, the appropriate parameters into the formula. So now what we can do, and according to the order of operations, we need to handle what's inside of the square root here first. So I have minus 8 living the same way, plus and minus. And I have square root. Now 8 squared is a 64. Okay? 4 times 1 times 15 is a 60. So minus 60. Okay? All over 2. Okay? Because in the bottom, 2 times 1 equals 2. And so my next computation step is going to be 8 plus and minus. Now underneath the square root, we have to go all the way to the end. 64 minus 60 is a 4. All over 2. So at this point, carrying from the last step, the most recent step, square root of 4 is a 2. So I have minus 8 plus and minus 2 over 2. So now, what are we going to do with that plus and minus? It means 1x solutions. It means 1x solution is going to be minus 8 plus 2, all divided by 2. And the other x solution is going to be minus 8 minus 2 over 2. And so here it comes my first solution. Minus 8 plus 2 is a minus 6, divided by 2 is a minus 3. So that's one of my solutions. The other solution is going to be x equals minus 8 minus 2 is a minus 10, divided by 2 is minus 5. Okay, so these are my two answers to the quadratic equation, and those are my two solutions for the first example here. Looking over to example number 2, and let's once again try to get comfortable with the quadratic formula here. So, in example number 2, we would like to solve again. We'd like to solve, and the equation here appears to be 2x squared minus 7x plus 3 equals 0. And so, once again, with the formula, the power in this formula here, the quadratic formula, the power of that, the powerful thing about the formula, the quadratic formula here is that once you can find your A coefficient, your B coefficient, and your C coefficient, the formula works for all. It doesn't matter what these A, B, and C's are. So, in this equation, once again, the equation itself, start out when you're looking at the equation, starting out, it's in general form, the equation. So now all you have to do now is find out what your A value is. So in this case, A equals 2. Your B value in this case, including sign, negative 7. Your C value, in this case, positive 3. And so, the quadratic formula is going to say to solve for x, once again, minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. So instead I'm going to go directly into plugging it. So minus b is going to give me minus negative 7. And here's plus and minus according to the formula. And then it comes to square root. And then you do b squared, and b itself is negative 7. So I need to square 7. So this time, strictly, I do need to put negative 7 in parentheses and square. It's indicating that I'm squaring the whole negative 7. Minus 4 times 2 times 3. All of that here underneath the square root. And all divided by 2 times 2. And once again, let's try to work it out. Now, so x equals, now the minus 7, that's going to make it a positive 7, plus and minus underneath the square root. This is how we're going to handle it. Negative 7 all squared is a 49. Okay, minus 4 times 2 times 3, that's going to give me minus 24. All divided by 4 in the bottom. And so, going one more step forward, the portion underneath the square root is going to give me square root of 25. So because 49 minus 24 is a 25, here's a plus and minus, and here's we have 7. Here's divided by 4. Okay, so now my next step here would be, now square root of 25 is a 5, so I have 7 plus and minus 5 divided by 4. So that means this final answer right here is telling me that I'm going to end up with two different solutions. One solution is, it means one solution equals 7 plus 5 separately, divided by 4. The other solution is x equals 7 minus 5 divided by 4. So my two answers would be, one of them, 7 plus 5 is a 12, divided by 4, I have a 3. The other solutions, 7 minus 5 is a 2, divided by 4 is a 1/2. So this is my two solutions to example number 2.